Daniel Kovac had stopped feeling much of anything 3 years ago, on the day the Centauri front collapsed. The neural suppressor implanted at the base of his skull made sure of that. Standard issue for veterans of the Outer Rim conflicts, the military's solution to PTSD was to simply dial down the limbic system until emotions became background noise. He sat in the observation deck of station Kepler 442, watching Jupiter's storms churn in the distance, his prosthetic left arm resting on the table. The titanium fingers drummed a rhythm he didn't consciously control, a tick the neurosurgeons couldn't iron out. Around him, the station hummed with the controlled chaos of humanity's furthest research outpost, a place where xenobiologists studied the fragments of alien civilizations humanity had discovered but never met. "Excuse me, sir." The voice was small, uncertain, with an unusual harmonic overlay that marked it as non-human. Daniel turned slowly, his suppressor keeping his heart rate steady even as his eyes processed what stood before him. She was maybe a meter tall, bipedal, with digitigrade legs ending in three-toed feet. Her body was covered in fine, iridescent fur that shifted between silver and blue under the station's lights. Large, forward-facing eyes, too large for her face, blinked at him with vertical pupils. Pointed ears swiveled atop her head, tracking sounds across the room. Her face was distinctly feline, though the bone structure suggested something more complex than Earth's evolutionary paths had produced. And she had only one leg, the right one. Where her left should have been, there was a clean surgical absence, the fur around it recently regrown. "Can I help you?" Daniel asked, his voice flat, modulated by the suppressor. She shifted her weight, balancing on her single leg with a grace that spoke of extensive practice. In her three-fingered hands, she clutched a data tablet pressed against her chest. She wore what appeared to be a modified child's jumpsuit, station Kepler issue, with the leg sewn shut. "My name is Orla," she said, the translator implant in Daniel's auditory cortex rendering her chirps and clicks into standard English. "I'm a ward of the Xenological Protection Bureau. Dr. Chen said you were a soldier, that you fought in the war." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly, the only outward sign of reaction his suppressor couldn't mask. "I was. What do you need?" Orla's ears flattened against her skull, a gesture his combat training identified as apprehension in several species humanity had encountered. "I need to understand something. About violence. About why." The station's artificial gravity generators created a low thrum Daniel felt in his bones. He gestured to the chair across from him. Orla hopped to it with surprising efficiency, pulling herself up and arranging her leg beneath her. "You're from the Kepler 442b expedition," Daniel said. It wasn't a question. 2 years ago, the Deep Space Probe had found ruins on the fourth planet in the Kepler 442 system. And in those ruins they'd found her, a child of a dead civilization, in cryogenic suspension with over 400 others. Most hadn't survived revival. She was one of 16. "They found us in the sanctuary," Orla confirmed, her ears rotating forward now, engaged. "The xenologists say my people died in a war, that someone used quantum cascade weapons on our world, that the radiation burned away the atmosphere and sterilized the surface down to bedrock. They put us to sleep before the end, hoping someone would find us." Daniel knew about quantum cascade weapons. He'd seen their aftermath on 3 different worlds. The technology created a chain reaction in the quantum foam of spacetime itself, releasing enough energy to crack a planet's crust. Humanity had banned their development after the Centauri front, after seeing what they could do. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it, even if the suppressor wouldn't let him feel it properly. "My leg," Orla continued, looking down at the absence. "Dr. Chen said it was damaged in the cryopod, that they had to amputate, but that's not why I'm asking." She looked up at him, those enormous eyes unblinking. "I've been studying, learning about humans, about the galaxy, and I learned that you fought in a war too, that you lost something." Daniel's prosthetic fingers stopped their drumming. I don't understand why beings hurt each other, Orla said, her voice small but steady. My people are gone. Your people fought and died. I read the reports, thousands dead on both sides, and for what? Resources, territory, pride. Her ears flattened again. I'm trying to understand if there's a reason, if there's something that makes it make sense. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. The suppressor kept his memories at arm's length, but he could still access them, like viewing films from someone else's life. The Centauri front, the mining colonies, the cascading series of misunderstandings, pride, and fear that had turned a trade dispute into a bloodbath. No, he finally said. There's no good reason, just a lot of bad ones that seemed important at the time. Orla's tail, he noticed she had one, long and expressive, curled around her body. Then why do it? If everyone knows it's wrong, why do we still fight? Because knowing something is wrong and being able to stop yourself are different things. Because we're afraid. Because we think violence will solve problems when it usually just creates new ones. Daniel leaned back, his prosthetic hand opening and closing. Because sometimes we're hurt, and we want to hurt back. Because we're territorial animals wearing civilization like an ill-fitting suit. But you stopped, Orla observed. You're not fighting now. The war ended, and they put this in my head to make sure I wouldn't want to keep fighting. He tapped his skull above the suppressor sight. Does it work? It keeps me from feeling much of anything. Joy, anger, fear, love, it's all turned down to static. I'm functional. I can work, eat, sleep, but I'm not whole. Orla was quiet, processing. Then she asked, do you regret it, the fighting? That question cut through the suppressor's dampening field. Every day, even if I can't feel it properly, I know I do. Dr. Chen says I'll get a prosthetic leg soon, that it'll be better than my original, stronger, with enhanced servos and haptic feedback, but it won't be mine. It'll be a tool I wear. Orla looked down at her remaining leg. Is that what your arm is? A tool? Daniel flexed the prosthetic fingers, watching the synthetic tendons move beneath the titanium plating. It's a reminder that actions have consequences, that the universe takes its payment one way or another. They sat in silence, the veteran and the orphan, two casualties of wars neither had wanted. Outside, Jupiter continued its eternal storm, indifferent to their conversation. Finally, Orla slid down from her chair, landing on her single leg with practiced balance. She hopped closer to Daniel, clutching her tablet tightly. Can you give me a hug, please? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel froze. The request was so simple, so human, or at least so universal, that it cut through years of conditioning. The suppressor tried to clamp down on the emotion rising in his chest, but for once it failed. Something in those large, alien eyes, something in the courage it took for a child who'd lost everything to ask for simple comfort, broke through. For the first time in 3 years, Daniel smiled. It was small, uncertain, like a muscle remembering how to work after long atrophy, but it was real. He stood slowly, knelt down to her level, and carefully wrapped his arms around the small alien child. She pressed her face against his shoulder, and he felt her whole body shaking with relief. His prosthetic hand rested gently on her back, and his flesh hand cradled her head with infinite care. We can't undo the past, he said softly, but maybe we can stop it from happening again. Maybe that's enough. Orla nodded against his shoulder. Maybe we can teach each other about why it's wrong, so others won't forget. Daniel held her until her shaking stopped. This child from a dead world and this soldier from a living one, finding in each other evidence that compassion could survive even the worst humanity, and the universe could inflict. When they finally separated, Daniel's smile remained. It hurt, like blood returning to a numb limb, but it was there. Thank you, Orla said, wiping at her enormous eyes with the back of her hand. Thank you, Daniel replied, meaning it more than she could know. Outside, Jupiter raged on. But inside station, in a small observation deck, 2 survivors of violence had found something wars could never create: connection. And for the first time in 3 years, Daniel Kovac felt alive.